Alright, so I did the hardest hose first. I was able to get it in with this hose still in place, but it was very difficult, so I recommend you do take this off. We didn't take this off in the removal. Just work a pick around the inside. As you can see, probably not see on this, but there's a lot of rust on that pipe on my car, so it came off pretty hard. But you definitely should do this to get the hand space in order to get that hose clamp on. Because the silicone hose clamp is a lot smoother, it just rolls around there and it'll drive you nuts no matter what tool you put in there to try to get it oriented properly. Pushing in that silicone hose was quite difficult there onto the block. Again, I would have taken that large coolant pipe, just the outside section, okay, just the outside section. You can pry it back enough. That is enough to give you enough to just squeeze your hands in there to be able to orient both the hose and the clamp. It would have taken me 45 minutes less. I've been going at that hose clamp trying to roll it around and get it positioned properly for about 45 minutes. So this is the most difficult one. I just wanted to get this clip in before I put everything else back. So yeah, take that hose off, the bigger one, the one end, get your hands in there. And there was a forum post saying that using Windex on the inside of the hose and on the outside of the metal part helps. I think that helped in my case. It adds some lubrication, but the inside ones, the small ends, are very tight. So just push it in, but you also have to be gentle because it's so soft. So it takes a real touch. If you're a beginner, I wouldn't recommend you try to do this. And other thing is the hose clamp, don't put it on too tight or too loose, because once you get it on, then you're going to want to slide the clamp past that really sharp 90-degree down there. And when you do that, if it's too tight, it rolls down and there's a little metal tab somewhere on there that the screw for the clamp tries to snag on. Then you can't pick it back up. If you put it on too, I can't think right now, if you put it on too loose, then it won't go, it'll keep sliding around too much. So too tight, it won't go around the 90. Too loose, it'll flop around too much. Keep your old hoses for reference. The big squiggly one is the top hose, okay? Don't mix those up. Alright, so even taking out that coolant hose, I'm pretty sure it does help, okay? It adds maybe about 1 inch of clearance for your screwdriver in the same orientation as the time we took it off. So from the back of the firewall here, you go in with the screwdriver. But what worked for me, because you have to hold the clamp in place or else it just wobbles around. I'm at the front of the car right now, okay? There's my hand. I came in, I leaned completely over, okay? My left hand came in from the back, okay? You come all the way in from the back, and just like this, pinched up against the block, you hold the clamp, and then, now my left hand's on the camera, but while your left hand's holding the clamp, you come in from back here with your flathead, same size as that orange one I had in the removal, and then you can hold the clamp enough so it doesn't rotate around, and you can tighten it down there. This stuff is all really tight, but that's what finally worked for me here. So see, there's a clamp tightened down. You want it to be in that orientation. That's where your screwdriver comes in from the firewall. Now that coolant hose, like I said, it added maybe 1 inch of clearance. If I hadn't taken it off already before I figured out this leaning over the front of the car thing, I would have tried it without it. But I guarantee you, with this bend that exists in it, it definitely helped in my screwdriver getting in more smoothly while my hand was in there on the angle. But we did it last time with this in place, so you should try the leaning over thing before you take this off. If you need the extra clearance, then take this hose off, then you'll be able to do it for sure. Once you get that really bottom one on, the rest should be smooth sailing. You can see at what point I am now. That little 5/8 one that goes into that hard coolant pipe down there, it was a bit tight too. Little bit of Windex and worked it in. It's much easier than the first one I showed you. So once you get this stuff in, just make sure you plug everything back in that you took out, and we'll be fine. Alright, so I've got all these in. Now we are back here again, okay? This top one, okay, that top plastic piece is bent down a little bit. I don't know if this is from my prying, but I highly doubt it. What's happening is the silicone hose at the bottom, I put it in and the hose clamp's going on, but that hose clamp is about 2 millimeters away from the bottom of that top piece of plastic. So when I put the other hose in, the thickness of the hose and the actual hose clamp that comes on, those are going to be touching. I am going to try this. Hose clamp to hose clamp contact should be fine, but it's very tight here. So for those of you thinking of going straight onto the metal, again, like I said, the only weird thing about that is how far in is it going to go, where that metal actually is down there, because everything seems to be lining up decently here right now. I don't know if this piece right here, if it were to go further into the firewall, how it would extend over here. So if you're going to do that, maybe get your brass hose barbs, make sure that they're longer so that they can make up for the depth of that hose, although still it'll bend at that 90 there, which is not something that you want. So this will be kind of an experiment test, so even after this there'll be more parts to this in case something fails or overheats or whatnot. But yeah, I'm just showing you guys all the things. This again could just be my car that top one is bent down, could be that all of them are like this. So I'll keep going with the install, but you guys have all these things to make your own decisions based off of now. Right. Alright, it's so deep in there you have to use a stubby screwdriver. Have good control for that. Now, no matter what orientation I put that hose clamp in, with the hose, the actual metal band part, okay, is scraping on this already before it gets in there, which means it's going to be impossible to put the other hose on. I have to find a way to get those plastic pieces off. You guys saw how it was a challenge the last time. I'll have to figure it out. But if there is a decent gap between these two in your car, maybe it'll be different. Like I said, maybe it's only my car that's like this. Then go ahead and just put them on this because the lengths are just fine. But if you run into this case like me where this is already touching the bottom of that, obviously the next hose is not going to go on. So gotta get these off. I'm using a combination of dremeling and prying to get them off. Just be very careful not to hit those AC lines on the left, as you're going to be going in with many different angles from the Dremel to get this done. My Dremel wheel busted into 3 pieces. Wear safety glasses for this. This task requires a lot of patience not to damage anything around or the metal pipe underneath. I nicked that top metal pipe inside right now. I twisted it over with a pick, so I should have shown it to you in the frame before, but that Dremel can easily go into that metal pipe. You have to be very careful not to go too deep as you're cutting the plastic in thin slices and pulling them out. This takes a while and a lot of patience, so really pay attention to not cutting that metal pipe underneath in the process. Okay, so right there with the pick I pulled off whatever plastic was left. Hopefully you can pick it up with the light. I'll try to change it around, but you can see that I have nicked that top pipe. This is all just to show you guys to be very careful when you're doing this. Because right when that Dremel goes through the plastic, it starts hitting that thin tube of piping up there. This should be fine in my case, but again, another experiment. Can you nick it a little bit and it'll be fine? I'm almost 99% sure the amount I've nicked it, it'll be fine, but be very careful because you're competing with those AC lines on the side. I'm not going to lie to you guys, I bumped them just a little bit here and there. They are metal, so you will hear them, but you can only graze them one time. After that, you're gonna have problems, so really pay attention in here. I haven't figured out how I'm gonna do the bottom one yet. The rest, the ring will not turn no matter what I do, but that wiring bundle underneath is even more sensitive than the AC line, so really you have to be careful. There is only one angle that works, okay? I have both my hands occupied, so I can't really show you, but you see how I'm pointing the camera in like this at a 45? So just like this, okay? You see where the camera's going in? You want to come in from here with the Dremel. The wheel is just going to have a millimeter of clearance on both sides, and then you want to work your way back in slices into this corner here, okay? You want to work your way back into there. That's the only way you're going to get in there without damaging the pipe, the wires underneath, or the AC lines. Okay, you want to do a little bit from underneath the pipe too, and then do that angle that I told you, going in from here, and slices working back. Guys, it's really important to pry the bottom off one with a straight pick. If you use a 90-degree angle pick down there, you're going to poke right through that wire loom, and then God knows what's going to happen. So you want to use a straight pick to break off the plastic once you've dremeled it down enough. So this method of prying and chipping with the straight pick did work. I was able to get all of the plastic pieces off. You can see some of them are still stuck in the behind the wire loom there and at the bottom, but those are just to be picked up with a screwdriver. They're not attached to anything, so this was doable. But man, I cannot stress how careful you have to be in here not to damage any other things or those pipes underneath. Use a vacuum cleaner to get all of the plastic in that area out to reduce risk of fire, and put the vacuum cleaner on the two coolant hoses and pull out if there's some plastic that went into the metal pipes a little bit, but there was nothing in mine. Alright, so the hose clamp there, I had to reorient it so that that thick part where the screw is on top. Before it was at the back. You need to use a stubby screwdriver to get this in, because if it hits that piece of plastic at the back, this hose is way too short in that case. So that you have to do like that. This went into the hose barb a decent amount. Those metal pieces at the back, I don't know what any reviews online are saying. They do not go far into them. Those are much thinner diameter than the DO88 hoses. They really do fit on the plastic pieces better, but you guys saw what a nightmare of junk those plastic pieces are. So these 3/4 slide in way too smooth in there, and this is not straight, okay? That pipe, that piece of hose is on an angle. I'm gonna install clamps on both ends, but if this leaks or if they break or tear, I'll tell you. But these DO88 hoses are a bit too short to go onto the metal piece at the very back. The top one I should be okay, and even that other hose down there, the one that goes all the way down, the first one we put, that one is not fully on. It is on to be tight enough, but that's why I'm saying your brass hose connections might be really important to give you the extra amount of length here, because anywhere that you lose length from your connections, you're gonna have to make up for it. Where I'm pointing the light right now, that 90-degree is gonna bend more, creating a risk of a tear there. So I'm going to use this extra flexing, and hopefully it all turns out fine. But those ends on that hose should be smaller if they were meant to fit on the metal. They do say on their site that they're meant to go on the plastic, but you guys saw that they don't go on the plastic smoothly. At least they didn't on my car and the condition it's in. Whether that's stock or whether that was due to tampering the plastic, but I told you guys, I'm 90% sure I did not bend that top plastic piece enough to create an odd alteration. But let this be one example for you. The only correction I'll make to what I was saying right now, because one of the hoses flopped down, I was talking about all the connections and hoses correctly. The only thing is the hose we were talking about is not the top hose, the one that goes all the way to the front, which is the one we first changed. I was talking about the bottom hose, okay, having problems making the link between the two. Even with the stubby screwdriver, it's nearly impossible to fit your hands in there in any orientation to put the hose clamp on in order to leave space to put the other hose on. You can't put that screw piece at the top so that the other hose slides on. The hose is starting to be quite short. I mean, sure, DO88 says you need to keep the plastic piece on there, but if there's any of those Volvo planned obsolescence bean counter engineer people watching this, probably laughing at how junk they made these cars so that people blow their head gaskets on coolant leaks and these cars go into the junkyard. So I'm gonna keep trying to go at it with the stubby screwdriver, but man, this job is, for a small job, it's a joke that it's this difficult. Well, this job just does not want to end. That hose, if I put it far enough in on the metal piece that I can clamp it down, it's too short to reach the brass connectors, and I have the longer of the two brass connectors on the bottom. It won't make it around that plastic bend, and it won't connect into the brass connector. So what I have to do is go to Volvo and buy those two little plastic pieces that plug into the firewall that we cut off, and then install the hoses onto those. hopefully I can do something with the clamps. I really don't know what to do here, but if anyone tells you it's easy to put them on those two pieces at the back, man, they don't know what they're talking about. So this, yeah, we'll see what we do next year. So I decided to try to take that piece of plastic on the right out. Only the top half comes out when you take that little screw out. The bottom would be a big mission to take out because it's way down there. So even that doesn't help. You just have to try your best with a stubby screwdriver to orient your clamps. And those bottom hoses, they're gonna be squeezed up against that piece of plastic there. So we'll see how it does on this car. Alright, so the only way you're going to be able to tighten this hose clamp, even with a stubby screwdriver, like I said, the DO88 hose is much larger than that little steel pipe that is coming out of the firewall. The hose clamp, you won't be able to hold it and tighten it if it's on there too loose. It's going to move around too much for you to get enough power onto the screw. So the great fortune of the fact that the hose is much bigger than the pipe is that you don't have to account for the pipe expanding the hose when you go to put the clamp on. So what you're going to do is get this outside of the car, tighten down just enough to the where you slide it in over the hose, okay? It pretty much grabs the hose and stays in that spot, so that once you put it onto that pipe, then you go in there and you just do the last few turns to tighten it down completely. You will not be able to tighten it with this size of a stubby screwdriver. There it is beside an Olfa knife to give you reference. I've decided not to buy the plastic junk pieces from Volvo. I'm just gonna squeeze these in as best as I can. So that hose on the bottom, make sure to put the clamp on before you tighten the one in the firewall so that you can use that. Now on the firewall you can see that bottom hose clamp is not vertical. It's slanted slightly towards the driver's seat. That's because that excess piece will bite into the hose on top because the clearance is too low. So your stubby screwdriver would have to get in there. I couldn't do it, so I'm going to get a small socket on a universal joint and try to use a drill to tighten that bottom hose clamp now. Alright, so for the Gates hose clamps that I've been describing in this series, I'm using a 5/16 on a universal joint with an adapter onto, I don't know, about a 1.5 foot extension. You could use a ratchet or a drill. I might use this impact wobble universal joint. It's probably going to work better, but if you don't have one of those, these are more accessible and you can buy them, but you need a 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch adapter if you're not using a small ratchet. So that's what I'm going to try now. So I put this in there and it does work. Alright guys, so who thought on earth this would be such a nightmare job to do the proper way? The hose clamp at the bottom, once it's tightened down, it is still too big to clamp onto the hose. Okay, so it will not clamp down onto the hose. The hose is too big, the metal piece is too small. I'm gonna have to rig something up, either do a double joint with a smaller hose coming out to an adapter to this to do it, or get the Volvo plastic pieces, which we saw do not work, okay, because the clearances were too tight. So I'm gonna have to rig something up for this. Whatever I do, I'll show you guys. But this stuff did not work. Alright guys, so I used my accurate measuring tool here again to measure the inner diameters of the DO88 and the old hoses. Okay, the old hoses had the 3/4 ID on the outside. I knew this was 5/8, but I double checked it, and yes, it is 5/8. Okay, so what I did was I took this end, these are the smaller ends, okay, that these two pipes have, the big squiggly one and this one, and I went into the firewall and I tried to get this on those metal pieces that come out of the firewall to see if they're the right size, and this would not fit on. Okay, so look at how sensitive it is. A 3/4, as we saw with the clamps, would fall off. It's too loose. A 5/8 inner diameter is too small. So those metal pieces coming out of the firewall are 11/16. We need to get 11/16 inner diameter hose with a small adapter and then put it on the DO88 hose. Let's see if I can source everything and we'll keep it going from here. Now, I mean, with all the things that I've done and all the money, I think after this one, the money that I will have spent, some of you, if you aren't doing too much, I don't know, performance driving or anything like that, you just might be better off at this point. I'm guessing that all of the parts from Volvo would be like, say, $50 per hose, $200 in all cases. The only place where you will have a problem is those firewall junction pieces that you saw me drummeling off today. You may run into that, so it still will be difficult, but once you get them off, if you don't damage those two pieces of metal pipe coming out from the firewall, you may be able to just replace everything with stock OEM stuff and be good for a decent amount of time. So based on everything you see in this series, decide for yourself if you want to do the stock coolant hoses or the modifications that are required to do for me on this car with this one. Your cases might be slightly different based on your cars and their condition. Alright guys, so I searched online and 11/16 silicone hose, I couldn't find it anywhere on the internet. So I came back with the old hose, okay? There it is, the 5/8 end of it, and I shoved it onto the firewall there, and I finally got it partially in. I'm hoping that it's because the hose is old that it's not going all the way in. But you see, it's in there. Alright, so I have to take the gamble and get 5/8 silicone hose. And either I'm going to get a silicone hose reducer that goes from 5/8 to 3/4 and then put a 3/4 to 3/4 coupler into the D088 hose, which currently I don't have out here. Or I'm going to bring a short piece of 5/8 silicone hose out, clamp that directly onto there, and then use a 5/8 to 3/4 coupler, and then the coupler to the D088 hose. So stay tuned once I get all these parts in, and we'll see what ends up working on my car. Alright, so the parts are on order for the reducers. Now, the one final note I want to make in this part of the series is take a look at the brass couplers. You can't really see them well right now, but if you go back in the different parts, you'll see much more clearly. There's a reason I prefer the brass hose barbs versus PEX fittings. When you go to Home Depot, you can find PEX fittings for $3 or $4. These things are more expensive and they're harder to find, but the reason I like them, especially with silicone hoses, any type of coolant hose though, is that when this soft material grabs with the hose clamp, it's not a straight sharp ridge that digs into it. The PEX fittings have sharp ridges, hose barbs don't. So you might be just fine with the PEX fittings, but it's my preference to always search a little bit more and use brass hose barbs instead of PEX fittings. Now what I might do on the left side there is use an aluminum reducer or an aluminum hose barb, because now, not that this is a significant, but in terms of weight, brass is heavier than aluminum, so when we do our couplings, I don't want those hoses to sag too much, possibly causing some kind of problem. Probably won't, this is overkill, but I think I'm going to get aluminum couplers for what I need on the left side. But this stuff will all be clear in the next part of the series.